Let's cross to our correspondent in London, Giles Gibson, for the latest on the new leadership battle following the resignation of Prime Minister Liz Truss. So, Giles, good morning to you. It's great to have you talking to us here on the programme. So, lots happened yesterday. In fact, a lot has been happening over the last few weeks. But just talk to us now. What happens? What is the process going forward?
Well, the dust starting to set here in London after Liz Truss's resignation. Not exactly a surprise, but perhaps some observers here in UK politics in Westminster weren't quite expecting her time in office to finish just that quickly, although, of course, the pressure had been building on her for days and days, really, especially in terms of her economic strategy. You're right, now we are shifting focus to really who could replace her as leader of the Conservative Party and as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. A few names kind of rising to the top of the list in terms of who's being talked about, the media buzz. It's certainly Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister. There is a lot of talk about him making this extraordinary political comeback. Of course, he was Liz Truss's predecessor before being forced out of office after a series of scandals, notably the Partygate scandal. There's also a lot of buzz around the name of Rishi Sunak, who is the former Chancellor. He came second to Liz Truss in the leadership contest that we had over the summer. So those are the two names that are being talked about a lot. But other senior Conservatives could also potentially throw their hat into the ring as well.
What about, yes, that would be I suppose, the route that they would want to take. But there's also talk about calling a general election, even though the deadline for the next UK general election will only be in January 2025. Is it possible that this could be the moment that this happens sooner?
Well, that's been the message from opposition parties here in the UK, both Labour as well as the Liberal Democrats, saying that now is the time to call a general election, that the Conservative Party, having switched from Theresa May to Boris Johnson to Liz Truss, that there have just been too many changes and that the Conservatives need to go back to the country. They need to have a general election to hit reset, if you like. Actually, one of the arguments that Boris Johnson's supporters are making for him making this extraordinary political comeback is that he won the general election in 2019. So the argument they're making is that it would make sense for Boris Johnson to return because he has faced the voters in a general election as leader of the Conservative Party. But, I mean, just take Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition Labour Party, for example. He was saying we can't afford more of the Tories' chaos. And we also had a member of the Liberal Democrats opposition party that actually they want to see Boris Johnson barred from running entirely in this leadership contest. I don't think that's going to happen, but clearly we are just now watching to see whether Boris Johnson throws his hat into the ring and whether he can get enough support from his Conservative MPs in order to get onto that ballot.
Yeah, I mean, it would be so interesting to see if that is the position, because, I mean, there was a lot of anger at Boris Johnson in terms of how he handled the whole COVID and the drinks at the House. And, you know, there was anger. There was a lot of anger. I mean, why would that suddenly disappear if he comes back? And, you know, is that possible? How are the British public feeling about the Conservatives of this time?
You're absolutely right. There is a lot of anger, I think, still simmering away in the background in terms of how the Partygate scandal turned out. All of these reports of drinking inside 10 Downing Street, and of course a lot of it rising all the way to the top up to Boris Johnson himself when he was still Prime Minister. The reason I think a lot of Conservative MPs are trying to perhaps manoeuvre Boris Johnson back into 10 Downing Street is that he actually still remains a very popular figure in terms of the grassroots of the Conservative Party, that despite all of that scandal, all of those revelations over the last few months before he was finally forced out of office, that his popularity really did stay pretty high amongst Conservative members, amongst the grassroots of the party. I can tell you I was actually speaking to one Conservative MP last night. I was asking him about how he saw the leadership contest playing out. He was saying he could potentially see a scenario in which you have the contest completely wrapped up by Monday night. And he was saying that because what the Conservatives have done, they've set a 100-vote threshold for you even to get onto the ballot. So you need to get 100 Conservative MPs to support your leadership bid. That is seen as a very high bar, and potentially what could happen is you could just have two candidates who make that threshold, who get up to 100, and then you could see the second place person deciding to step down, trying to reach some sort of stability for the country and the party and trying to get clarity as soon as possible. Of course, one scenario could be that Boris Johnson is the second place Conservative MP in that race, and then who knows, would he be prepared to step down and let somebody else take on the mantle?
A name that's also doing the round and a possibility is Penny Mordaunt. So a former Defence Secretary who was second runner-up in the last Conservative leadership race. What are sentiments there?
Yeah, Penny Mordaunt is another name who has a lot of support amongst Conservative grassroots members. She did pretty well, surprisingly well, in the leadership contest that we had over the summer. But I think a problem for her could be the fact that they have set that 100 vote threshold, because of course before she gets anywhere near any sort of vote in terms of the members, she's got to get 100 Conservative MPs on board to sign up to her campaign. And with names such as Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace potentially all throwing their names into the hat, then it looks like a pretty steep hill to climb in terms of Penny Mordaunt getting 100 votes. But look, who knows? At this stage, we still don't have a single person who's actually officially confirmed that they're running. So that's what we're going to be watching for in the next sort of 6 to 12 hours or so.
Sure. All right, we'll leave it there. Giles, thanks for talking to us. Good to have your views coming from London there, just giving us an update on what has happened with Liz Truss. And it just seems like there's just no clear front runner at this stage in time.